Hello everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful, Rabbit Hole, King Dia, Lauren Frey, and Jaw the Dragon. It's over, everyone! It's completely over. Tech experts at IGN have confirmed that Breath of the Wild 2 is not going to be able to run on Switch. So that means that Nintendo is definitely going to release a new console next year, and it's going to run Breath of the Wild 2 at a higher resolution than even those high-end gaming PCs. No. It's the same old cycle, right? It's the same old bullshit over and over and over again. The Switch Pro was proven fake over and over and over again for the past 4 years for such a long time that the industry has moved on to the next thing. They have moved on to the mythical Switch 2 and are fabricating entire narratives out of thin air about how Nintendo is not confident in the future of the Switch and how they're going to put out a newer model with all these crazy features, and they're just going to demolish the competition. So yeah, it's just a baseless theory based on nothing but conjecture. It is complete crap. It is no different than anything we've seen with the build up to the Wii, the 3DS, the Wii U, and the Switch. It is just game journalists desperately trying to present this narrative that there's something wrong with Nintendo consoles and that the company desperately needs to move on to the next thing. The reason they do this is to create this situation where well, first of all, it makes Xbox and PlayStation look better in comparison, because if Nintendo is always lagging behind the competition, it paints this image of Xbox and PlayStation being cutting edge and top-of-the-line technology when they're really, really not. Nintendo has always been superior in the actual game department, which is why we buy video game consoles. But the industry has pretty consistently, since the 90s, refused to acknowledge it. They refuse to acknowledge Nintendo's superior game development skills, their superior IPs, their superior technology, their innovations, or really anything. The second reason, I think, is that Nintendo, these people need to set the stage for the disappointment that is the inevitable release of Nintendo's next piece of hardware. Now, I'm sure there's a new piece of hardware coming. I'm sure it's planned. But to suggest it's coming next year to co-release with Breath of the Wild 2 is, I think, coming out of left field and has no real basis in reality. I expect Switch is going to be around for a long time. I don't expect we'll get a replacement for another 5 years, to be honest with you, with the current trajectory of things. There's no reason to release a new piece of hardware when it's dominating the sales charts as it is. I would say that's actually a bad thing. I said this about the Wii era too, in which I think Nintendo should have just kept putting out Wii games up until 2014, and then release their new console, 2015, and then release their new HD console. I don't really think the Wii needed to go quite so soon. I think back then, Nintendo was kind of forced into upgrading the Wii because of the third-party refusal to support the Wii in any meaningful capacity. But things are different now, right? The industry has kind of stagnated. It's not evolving anymore. And as a result of that, the Switch can run essentially every game that comes out on modern platforms, regardless of what game journos and fanboys want you to think. So as a result of that, it's getting harder and harder for third-party developers to justify not supporting the console, right? Kingdom Hearts on Cloud, that got huge backlash. People aren't happy with Square's ports in general. People get upset when certain games don't come to Switch. It's really impacting their numbers, and I do think we are going to start seeing the point where it's universally accepted that Nintendo is at the top of the industry again. Right now, we're kind of in this weird phase where people are pretending that well, PC gaming is superior because you can play everything through emulators, but they have to jump through a whole lot of hoops to justify that Nintendo is and always to justify their hatred and contempt of Nintendo. The Switch 2 conspiracy is nothing more but an attempt to downplay the Switch. It's an attempt to make the Switch look weak, that it's not viable in the market, and that it has no new upcoming games that people are genuinely excited for, which is simply not true.